3, 2, 1. Okay, so very warm welcome this afternoon to our summer series for our workplace wellbeing webinars. This one is our Best Me in 45 on resilience and stress. So my name is Michelle, I'll be your presenter this afternoon. Thank you for everyone who said hello in the chat function, told us where you're from. If you haven't had a chance to do that yet, it's really lovely to find out whereabouts in Medway or perhaps a wider area that you're working. So do say hello, tell us where you are, what your job role is. It's helpful for us to see what kind of organisations we get coming along to these sessions. Right, so just a little bit of about us and housekeeping before we really get into the information. So we're from the Medway Healthy Workplaces programme. My name is Michelle and I'm joined by my colleague Justine this afternoon, who is monitoring the chat there. So if you do have questions as we go along, please do use the chat function. If you haven't used Zoom before, you'll see that speech bubble on the control bar, which you can click on and type a message. If you need to drop out for any reason during the call, that's absolutely fine. Just let us know you need to leave and we can send you the recording afterwards. So you're probably wondering how you come along to be here today. So the Medway Healthy Workplace programme is a workplace wellbeing scheme in Medway and slightly wider area for some organisations who've maybe got a footprint in Medway, and we offer wellbeing support, resources and training for workplaces and our award scheme, the Medway Workplace Wellbeing Award. So this course is being run as part of that. You might have other connections with the wider public health team in Medway or have come across it on the training portal, and you're all very welcome this afternoon. So I've asked you to introduce yourself. Now, the first question before we really get started, I want you to have a think about and use the chat function, is to think of an accomplishment that you're proud of or something you've achieved. It can be big or small. And you can keep that to yourself if you want to, but it'd be lovely to have you sort of sharing and make the session a little bit more interactive. So again, using the chat function, if you've got something that you've achieved recently, it could be work related, it could be home related, could be big or small, do type that into the chat function and let us know what that is. If you're not part of the Medway Healthy Workplaces programme already and you want some more information, do let us know in the chat function again so we can follow up with you and send you some more information about the wider benefits of the programme after that session today. And then there'll be an opportunity to sort of come along to other sessions and network with other local businesses and get wider support. As I said, please do stay on mute during the session unless we specifically ask you to unmute and talk. Make sure you're comfortable, you've got a drink, take notes. No need to ask to leave and use the facilities and stuff, just sort of nip away, and there'll be a follow-up survey at the end. Justine will put the link in the chat when we get to that point. We really appreciate your feedback for these sessions. It can help us to develop other topics and shape them for you as we go forward. So let's get started. So this resilience and stress session, so the objectives, so we're going to actually look at what the terms of stress and resilience are. It's often really helpful to understand what we really mean by those terms. We're going to identify our stress triggers and something called our stress signature. We'll have a look at strategies we can use to manage our stress, and we'll also discuss ways that we can prioritise our well-being. So as I've said, think of an accomplishment, something that you're proud of or have achieved, big or small, and feel free into sharing the chat if you feel comfortable. Just give you a minute to sort of type those messages in if you're happy to share. So could be something really small. Maybe you've tidied the garden, maybe you've tried out a new recipe, or maybe you've done something big and completed something for charity or some volunteer work. Doesn't matter what it is, it has got a purpose to the training, I promise. So it'd be great to see what you've been up to, and we'll come to that in an activity shortly. Have we got many suggestions in the chat, Justine?
Yes, we've got Nikki joined a community samba band, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic.
And Gemma presented at a meeting this morning, and Amelia's gone back to work after 7 years of being a stay-at-home mum. Elizabeth has just started volunteering at a local food bank. Rebecca made a marvellous pavlova, first time making it, and everybody enjoyed it. Brilliant.
Wow, oh, that sounds really technical.
I could enjoy eating that now. Christina's managed to keep 5 plants alive. That's something I definitely can't do.
No, me neither.
Again, PJ, I think, has gone back to work after 15 years. Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so lots of really good examples of things we've achieved there, and some big and some small. I think for me, keeping the houseplants alive would probably be quite a big achievement, to be honest. Or having their work, like Lisa said, having their work promoted on BBC local radio. Well, that's fantastic. And people starting running again after 4 years. So lots of fantastic achievements. So yes, really do pat yourself on the back and be proud of what we're achieving. I mean, life happens and how we cope with it can vary. And in this webinar, we'll look at some strategies how to equip ourselves, but it's really important that we look at the things we are achieving. I think life is just sort of driven to make us look at what we don't have, what we're not doing, all the things we've got building up, but actually to reflect on things we have accomplished and things we're doing well on a good day. It just gives us a bit more of a sense of purpose and accomplishment, which really can boost our well-being. So thank you to everyone for sharing that in the chat function there. So let's move on to our definition. So what we mean by stress. So the stress we mean is an adverse reaction that people have to excessive pressure placed on them. So what does that mean? So we all have pressures placed on us. And we need that bit of pressure. We need that bit of drive to make us get up in the morning. We need that bit of drive to help us complete deadlines at work or get the washing hung out at home and do things like that. We need that bit of pressure to make sure we get our training completed, perhaps to get reports finished. But sometimes we can have an adverse reaction to that when we have excessive pressure. So you might really feel like you've got pressure coming in from all angles, and that type of demand then becomes stress, and that's not such a healthy place to be. We need a bit of drive to begin with, but that can sometimes then tip over into stress when it becomes too much. So then we can lead to burnout. So burnout is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion, and that occurs from long-term stress. So long-term stress in your job when you have been working physically or emotionally draining role for a long time. Gender and age play a role in its prevalence, and we find from statistics that women and young people report feeling more prone to extreme stress, pressure and burnout. And 1 in 5 UK workers felt unable to manage their pressure and stress levels at work. If you think about your own workplace and your own teams, 1 in 5 people, that's really too many, isn't it? And we want to do what we can to share some tips with you. Unfortunately, we don't possess a magic wand, and we can't sort of wave that and make that stress go away for you. But what we can do is give you some tips and tricks that might help you to make that manageable, that little bit better. And often those small steps can then lead to bigger improvements. What we mean by resilience, so resilience is that ability to bounce back as well as our capacity to adapt in the face of challenging circumstances. And people often think of resilience thinking, well, I'm not very resilient, it's just the way I am. But actually evidence shows us that resilience is not a personality trait. It is something we can learn about, something we can develop, and we can all take steps to achieve that. And that's why we look back on those accomplishments. If we think, actually, I was in that stressful situation, I got that report finished, I hadn't been at work for 7 years, I was successful in getting a job, I've gone back to work. Those are really good achievements, something that can build our resilience. We can draw on those past experiences, how we've got through those difficult circumstances, and learn from those. And sometimes we do things a bit differently next time, but it's often we can take heart from what we are achieving and that we are actually doing much better than we maybe give ourselves credit for. And then the last definition we've got here on the slide is self-care. That's the ability of individuals, families or communities to promote and maintain health, to prevent disease and cope with illness and disability, sometimes with the support of a healthcare provider and sometimes without. And self-care isn't selfish, as we'll talk about a bit later. We need that ability as individuals, as workplaces, as communities, to maintain our health, to look after ourselves, because then we can cope with what life throws at us that little bit better. Right, so here on the next slide, we've got some causes of stress. There's also stress triggers. And some of these are more common and you'll recognise them in yourself. And the first ones we've got here are work-related stress. So the main causes of work-related stress, what we know from sort of evidence and studies that have been done, is that lack of control in the workload. When it just keeps piling in and it's out of your control, that's a really stressful situation. You might have higher demands on your time and energy, and sometimes we need those little bursts of energy to get things done when it's really quite busy. But if that continues long term and you don't get any respite, you don't get time to think or finish things, and you end up rushing things, that's where mistakes can happen and we can feel really drained. Fear of redundancy and restructure. I think someone mentioned in the chat that they'd been through a redundancy and were now in another role. So actually that can be a real cause of stress at that time. And that's why when we look back on those situations where we've been through in the past, we can draw on those and that experience to feel a bit more safe and secure. And actually we've been through that before. We did survive, and we can do that again. Difficult relationships with colleagues or a manager, that can be another cause of stress at work. And also, obviously, unfortunately, even in this day and age, there are the occasional workplace where you might get a little bit of bullying, harassment or discrimination. And whilst we do all we can to promote being inclusive and having good communication and abiding by sort of anti-bullying policies, it is important to flag these things if they happen, as they can become a source of stress. So another question for you, what sort of other environments, tasks and issues in life in general, so not necessarily work related, what other sort of causes of stress can people think of? If you'd like to use the chat function again and suggest some to us, what other sort of sources of stress might we come across? Yeah, thank you. I can see the chat function is being used. Our little icons going off there. What sort of things have we got? Do you want to read a few out for me, Justine, see what people have been saying?
Lack of money, parenting, relationships, health worries. Again, more health issues with either yourself or a family member, bereavement, teenage children.
Someone's been to my house.
Yeah, cost of living, more financial worries. Oh, isolation.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's a similar theme of relationships, children, health issues.
Yeah, thanks for your contributions, everyone. I think there's some real key themes there, isn't there? And I really like someone said health issues with themselves or family members, and that's so true, isn't it? It doesn't have to be your own health issue that's a source of stress. You might be worrying about caring for a family member or someone else in your family, and these are the sort of headings we use for those key health issues. So it's six key sources of stress. So finances, obviously, lack of money, insecure jobs, rising bills, they can be a real source of stress and worry for people. Life changes, so marriage, divorce, relationship breakdown, our children going through different life phases, that can be a real source of stress. Illness or injury we've mentioned, and yeah, bereavement, that's one of the top causes of stress. Just that non-stop lifestyle and significant life events. And if we think about those sort of 6 key headings, there's lots of other causes that fit within those. And unfortunately, we might even find ourselves at times where we're having 2 or more of these at the same time. So you might have a significant life event where you perhaps have a health diagnosis, you're not well, you have to change jobs as a result, that has an impact on your finances, or something else happens, or a bereavement impacts your finances, and these things can then really spiral. So it's no wonder that sort of 1 in 5 people are feeling stressed, and we know that 1 in 6 people suffer with sort of moderate mental health concerns at any one time. So it's definitely common. It's nothing to sort of fear. We sort of just need to learn how to sort of manage these things a little bit better. So I'm sure you'll notice amongst these things some of the causes of stress in your life. Sometimes particular environments or particular tasks might be a particular source of stress. I'm not going to ask you to share what sort of environment or task might stress you out individually, but just have a little look at yourself and notice how you respond to things. And if a particular person or a particular environment is causing you a source of stress, is there something you can do to reflect on that and think about developing a coping mechanism to deal in those situations? Perhaps giving yourself a bit more time, or taking a breather, or rewarding yourself with something nice that you enjoy, having completed that particular task, for example. So we're going to conceptualise sort of our ability at dealing with stress now. This is a model from mental health first aid training, and we call it the stress bucket. So the stress bucket represents our own capability of dealing with stress. So we've all got our own stress bucket, a metaphorical bucket, and life, all those sources of stress, they fill up our buckets. As we can see from the tabs there at the top, we've got worries at work, poor diet, financial pressures, lack of sleep, family and relationship issues, health concerns, and they're all pouring into our bucket. And if we don't release that pressure somehow, the bucket's going to start filling up, and in some cases filling up very quickly. So we might go from being relaxed or then coping well to actually becoming really quite stressed and anxious, and eventually overflowing and overwhelmed, at which point our bucket is going to literally pour over the side. So what we need to do is take some helpful coping mechanisms which will punch some holes in the bottom of that bucket. So as it shows on the diagram here, we might be doing some mindfulness practice, talking to friends and family, managing our time well, taking time for things we enjoy, and they punch holes in our stress bucket. and release some of that pressure. What we do want to avoid is this tap on the side here, these unhelpful coping mechanisms. So things like smoking, gambling, drinking too much alcohol, poor eating, because they might give us we think an initial relief of stress at the time, but in fact they're going to cause us more stress in the long term. So then they're just topping that bucket back up again. So we just definitely need to have a think about how we can build healthy coping mechanisms into our routines and protect that. So self-care isn't selfish. Obviously doing things, sometimes things do crop up and can get missed, but it's just that occasionally it's okay to miss one or two things, but sometimes we just need to really focus on our well-being and what we can do to look after ourselves. So we're now going to take from the idea of conceptualising our stress from that stress bucket into something we call our stress signature. So we've got how stress can make us feel, how it can make us feel physically, and how it can make us behave. So first of all, thinking about how stress might make us feel, would anyone like to use a chat function to suggest how stress makes you feel, either for you personally or something you've maybe noticed in someone else? What sort of feelings might stress give us in our day-to-day lives if we're a bit overwhelmed? Yeah, thanks for everyone for your contributions. What have we got in the chat, Justine? A few suggestions there I can see coming through, I think.
Yep. We have people feeling sick, maybe anxiety, feeling irritable, short-tempered, headaches, angry again, tummy ache, feeling restless from Elizabeth, loss of control, overwhelmed from PJ, difficult to concentrate, and tearful.
Yeah, really good suggestion. Thank you, everyone. So what I'm going to do is bring up our little table here. So we've got two ways that stress can make us feel. So in our actual feelings, in our sort of mental feelings, if you like, so irritable and impatient, overwhelmed, maybe thoughts racing, we might feel nervous, anxious or afraid. We might start to have a lack of interest in things we enjoy because we just feel so swamped, we just can't cope with so much on our plate that we can't add going to the gym or cooking a nice healthy meal on that. That's just too much. We can get a bit cynical, depressed, be full of self-doubt, feel helpless, trapped or defeated, might feel neglected, I think someone said isolated, lonely or detached. And in our physical body, so we might have difficulty sleeping, feel fatigued, get muscle tension and headaches, which has been said. Blurred eyesight or sore eyes may be linked to difficulty sleeping. Some people grind their teeth or clench their jaws. It's that sign of stress. And if you find yourself waking up in the morning and your jaw's very sore or clicking, it might be where you've been sort of grinding your teeth in your sleep and you didn't realise. Might not be breathing properly. Chest pains can contribute to high blood pressure. Indigestion and heartburn is often linked to stress as well, and then that constipation and diarrhea. So stress really can impact our health in some not very pleasant ways, certainly how we make us feel. So what about how it might make us behave? Any ideas from people as to how stress might make us behave? And this is probably the one place that you might notice stress more in your colleagues. So if you're not going to notice particularly if they're feeling nervous or if they've got chest pains or high blood pressure, that might not show, but you might notice some of their behaviour, how stress might make them behave at work or with perhaps in your family members even. Any suggestions if you'd like to add those to the chat? Yeah, thank you for contributing, everyone. What have we got, Justine? Some suggestions?
Well, we've got maybe being emotional, snappy, erratic, forgetful, having mood swings, unproductive, and withdrawn and grumpy.
Yeah, really good suggestions. Let's bring up the rest of the table on the slide. So many of what we've sort of covered here, so difficulty making decisions and concentrating, not productive, worrying, might be snappy or irritable with people, maybe biting our nails and picking our skin, maybe eating too much or too little. You might notice that in a family member, perhaps they don't want their dinner, they don't finish their meal when they would usually. Maybe with your colleagues, they usually come to lunch with everybody and they've stopped doing so. Or they're perhaps going out to the shop and eating more sort of chocolate and crisps and unhealthy snacks than normal. Smoking or drinking more than usual. Perhaps you notice sort of, oh, I bought that bottle of wine at the weekend and it's gone much more quickly than you thought it would be. Restless, you can't sit still, that sort of ants feeling, or being tearful or crying. So these are really important things to look out for. So you can look out for these things in yourself, and you might reflect on this list and think, oh, actually, I didn't realise I was biting my nails more and I was a bit stressed. Or some people hold a lot of tension in their shoulders and neck, and that can give you headache. So it's really about reflecting on this list and thinking, actually, what ones do form my stress signature? And sometimes it's easier to notice it in your partner or your children or really close friends and family. And then it's okay to then you can check in with them. So I've noticed you've been a bit irritable lately, or you've been off your food. Is everything okay? And you can check in with them and just offer them that listening ear, and then try and place them to some sources of support. But if you're noticing these things in yourself, perhaps you're getting a bit more indigestion than you would usually, that actually it's your body's way of telling you things are getting a bit too much. I need a bit of a breather. So have a think about what you see in yourself. And also the one thing that's not on this list is how stress can make us think. So sometimes you'll be having overwhelming thoughts or sort of being more negative thoughts. So if that's not normal for you and you notice that happening more, again, it's a sign of that stress and our body's way of telling us we need a break in this, we need to address this before it becomes too much. So now we're going to look at some practical ways we can actually manage our stress. And this particular slide comes with a bit of a caveat, because I appreciate that managing stress at work isn't always easy, and some of us work in very pressured jobs, particularly in sort of health and social care or education, and the workload isn't really that sort of flexible. But what we would encourage you to do is have a look at the wellness action plans from Mind, and you can sort of put down what good wellbeing looks like for you, and have a think about what you need to maintain and achieve good wellbeing, and then work with your colleagues or your manager to achieve that. So if you do have problems with your workload, even if it can't be sort of not very flexible, it is still important to ask our managers for help, to try to balance your time where you can, to reward yourself for achievements. Like we were saying at the beginning, what have we accomplished recently? Just rewarding ourselves for those achievements. It gives us a sense of purpose, and it helps us to reflect on the good things we have got going on and not dwelling on the negative. And just being realistic and kind to yourself. So if you've got that busy period at work and things are really stressful, try to take your break, try to have lunch, try to do something nice for yourself, even if it's just for 20 minutes, because that 20-minute break for your mind of turning things over and feeling super stressed will make a difference. There's actually quite a lot of evidence out there that if you take a lunch break or a break during the day, you're actually more productive in the afternoon. So there's that temptation, isn't there, to, oh, I must get this finished, I won't go to lunch, I'll work through that. Actually, in the long run, if you have just sort of 20 or 30 minutes, coming back to the work feeling a bit more refreshed, you'll actually get more done in the afternoon. And if you have got that difficult work-life balance, try to give yourself short breaks. If you can take some time off, do so. Or if it comes down to the school holidays and you don't work in the school holidays, so protect some time during that time to do something for yourself. Focus on your life outside of work, and then develop some end of day habits. So if you're working from home, it's very easy, I know, to sort of put your computer away and then get on with some home stuff, but try to have a sort of bit of a routine where you can close work down and put work away, whether it's going for a walk around the block or going to put some washing on or something. Develop those end of day habits and routines just to sort of separate work and life. And we have got a work-life balance webinar coming up in a few months' time. So if it's something that's particularly of interest, do look onto that. Justine will share some links to the other webinars we've got coming up in the chat sort of towards the end of this session. So do find out about the services you've got in your workplace. Some organisations have employee assistance or counselling programmes. Others offer internal support systems such as mentoring or buddy systems. Speak up and tell someone that you feel unsupported. Hopefully you can discuss this with your line manager, but if you feel you can't talk to them, speak to or write to someone else, maybe human resources, a trade union representative, or even a close friend. Developing good relationships with your colleagues can help. So connecting with people that work can help you to feel like you've got a network of support. And if you're all in that sort of stressful situation, you can support one another and think, actually, I'm not going mad, it's not just me, we're all in this together, and pull together a bit more as a team. So some broader strategies to help manage stress. The first thing we've got here is the 5 ways to well-being. Perhaps if anyone give me a thumbs up, or if they've heard of that before. It's quite a well sort of publicised theory. It's actually evidence-based. So there are 5 key sort of activities we can do to help us to manage our stress. So they are: be active, take notice, keep learning, connect and give. So the be active is an obvious one. As we exercise and move our bodies, it releases endorphins. Connect means sort of connecting with one another. That's sort of analogy of a problem shared is a problem halved. And just connecting and being sociable. We all learned in lockdown, actually, we're quite sociable people. We don't like to be kept away from each other too much. We need our friends and our family and that support network. Take notice, that refers to things like mindfulness type hobbies. You don't necessarily need to practice mindfulness in itself, but doing things like craft hobbies or things with our hands or cookery, things that focus our mind in the here and now, can help take our mind off the sort of churning over and remunerating on things that we're worrying about. Keeping learning, so that could be doing an adult education course, or just something simple like reading a book or trying a new hobby. And give doesn't mean giving money, it means giving of our time and ourselves. And with these activities, we want to try and make them achievable, physical, personal and social, using that APPS acronym. So the APPS represent a tangible way to measure things we can do to increase our resilience. So we can have things that are achievable, try and include activities that are physical, something personal and something social. And the more of these ingredients we can put into our lives, the better we can protect ourselves and increase our resilience, almost sort of grow our stress bucket. So making lifestyle changes can help us to cope with pressure, practice being straightforward and assertive in our communication, using relaxation techniques, developing our interests and hobbies, making time for our friends. And it's really important to look after our physical health as well, giving ourselves a break, rewarding ourselves for our achievements, getting a change of scenery, so things that get us out and about, going for a walk, I would just go to a cafe, and resolve conflicts if you can. So there's an old proverb that says not to go to bed on an argument. So where possible, try to resolve things. Might take time, but at least to know those resolutions are in progress. As we said, sort of building your support network, connecting with one another. Why these things are so important. What the 5 ways to well-being does is they improve our good functioning. So as the more of these things we do, we get that sense of achievement and sense of pleasure from them. It increases our well-being, our feelings of day-to-day overall happiness and satisfaction, and that increases our mental capital. So it increases our resilience, it releases the stress from our stress bucket or makes our bucket a bit bigger, gives us more self-esteem, and our cognitive capacity, emotional intelligence increases. So then we get into a nice positive upward spiral. The more of these things we do, we feel rewarded, we can cope with more, and life is good. Obviously, when we do have stressful times, it can be really easy to withdraw from these things. You know, oh, you know what, I haven't got time to go to the gym tonight, I'm not going to go to my adult education class, don't feel like going to lunch with my friends and colleagues. So you start to withdraw, but you can quite quickly then get into a downward spiral where your well-being, sense of overall happiness and satisfaction is diminishing, your mental capital starts to shrink, and that's when stress then becomes more of a problem. So obviously sometimes we've got a lot going on and we need to sort of manage what we can realistically, because we don't want our well-being activities to become a source of stress in their own right, but just try and have some protected time for something that you enjoy, even if it's just a bath with candles or something sort of 10 or 15 minutes just as a breather, so we can protect our time and help to look after ourselves. So just to give you a break from listening to me, using the chat function again, why do you think we don't always do the things that we should to help manage our stress? If we put something in the chat function, what do we think? What do we think prevents us from managing our stress? Yeah, thank you for joining in, everyone. So Justin, if you'd like to start going through the answers, what sort of things have people suggested?
We have things such as life just gets in the way, the guilt of putting ourselves first, asking others for help and support. We think we're coping far better than what we actually are, and time.
Yeah, all really good suggestions. So thank you. I mean, feel free to carry on contributing if you hadn't yet sort of had chance to say. I will just bring up the next slide. So these are some of the key things. So someone said not feeling that we're sort of not worthy of our needs are not as important. So we prioritise others' needs or tasks ahead of ourselves. And we see this really quite particularly in sort of health and social care settings where people have those caring roles, or in education, and sort of customer facing roles, that the customer or your students or your patients are much more important than your needs. So you sort of, or even as a family, maybe as a working parent or a carer, you might prioritise other people's needs instead of your own. You might feel that you're letting other people down. That sort of push through it mentality. We ignore how we're truly feeling, or we don't appreciate that we need help sooner rather than later. We feel we can cope with more, or should be able to cope with more of that expectation. Comparing yourself to others or minimising things. Of social media paints a bit of a false picture in how other people are coping, but obviously people post posts which are often the best side of their life, and they're not going to post pictures of themselves in tears and really struggling. So try not to compare yourself to others. You don't know how big their stress bucket is, what sort of support networks they've got behind them, and what other things they're not sharing. And we can have perceptions, and cultural differences can sort of prevent us from sharing our well-being. We might come from a cultural background where it's just not normal to talk about this, and sort of traditionally in the UK certainly it's been more less normal for men to talk about these things. That's now changing a bit more. Perceptions that putting on yourself first means putting others last, and that fear and stigma of how people might perceive you, and feelings again that we don't deserve it or we can't afford it, maybe not necessarily financially, but maybe the amount of time we have. But if you think back to sort of maybe going on an aeroplane, you see the picture of the air masks there. So the air stewardess will tell you to put your own mask on before you help others, and much happens the same in mental health. You've really got to make sure you're looking after yourself before you help others. We can't give from that empty cup. You're more useful to others when you're more resilient and they know what to expect from you. And just consider that as permission to look after yourself. If we keep running on empty, we'll get to burnout if we're not doing things to fill our cup. If we work longer to push through, and that diminishes our value, we might put unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And as I said, don't compare yourself. Comparison can be the thief of joy. So it's not selfish to practice self-care, and actually you'll be better at improving care and supporting others if you do look after yourself. You do deserve it. You're human. And if you find yourself negatively talking to yourself, just think about what you might say to your friend if they were going through your situation. If what they're saying to what you would say to a friend is different to you, just think about that and be kinder to yourself. Self-care doesn't have to be super expensive or super indulgent. So just as a wrap up, just encourage you to reflect back and notice your stress triggers and your stress signature, and what you can do to perhaps sort of cope better with those. If you notice actually, I am quite stressed and I didn't really think about it, just to give yourself a little breather. Identify some coping strategies you could try to manage and develop your resilience, and then accept the need to prioritise yourself and your well-being. If anyone's got any particular tips they find helpful for managing their own stress, please do feel free to share those in the chat. And we've got a little bit of sort of homework for you. So just consider one thing in the next week that will maximise your well-being, and take it from Justine and I. This is your permission to go and do that thing for yourself. So a little bit of me time to try something that's new for you. So just give you a chance to sort of suggest in the chat things you find helpful for your stress relief, and then we'll just share some additional resources for you. And if you do need to shoot off, please do fill in our feedback form for us. Justine's kindly put the link in the chat. It's always really helpful for us to see how you found these sessions, if they were too long, too short, too rushed, or you wanted a bit more detail on something, or if there's another topic we've maybe touched on that you'd like to know more about. So do fill that in, but yeah, please feel free to suggest in the chat anything that you do or have found helpful in managing stress. It's often really helpful to learn from one another. Just while you're thinking about the one thing you might do to maximise your well-being, or what you do to manage your stress, there's a whole screen of resources here. So there's loads of information out there on the web. Obviously, when you Google things, it can come up with some more interesting links, shall we say. So these are the ones that we sort of have tested out, that NHS recommended. So the Every Mind Matters website is fantastic. Got tips for general well-being, stress, loneliness, low mood, and a 5-question quiz which will give you your own personalised recommendations for improving your mental well-being. So if you don't remember anything else today, remember to have a look at NHS Every Mind Matters. And there's a range of talking therapy support available across Medway and the rest of Kent. You can refer yourself, and you don't have to refer to the one in your area. If you, for example, work in Medway but live in Maidstone, you can refer to the Maidstone or Medway service. Or if you've got family down in the coast, you can refer to a coastal service. So you can refer yourself to any service in the county. Release the Pressure is our confidential crisis line. So across Kent and Medway, it's available all year round, and you can text the word Kent or Medway to 85258 or call the number, and they'll give you some advice on the sort of services that might be best for you. There's some information on the slide here about around finances. Obviously, in the cost of living crisis, lots of people have been finding finances more of a stress than they're perhaps used to. So do have a look at the excellent resources from the Money and Pension Service. And again, we'll be having a financial wellbeing webinar in September. So it's not out to book onto yet, but it will be very soon. So keep checking back on the A Better Medway training portal. If you're finding that you're struggling with sleep as a result of stress, again, have a look at NHS choices for sleep. And there's some other workplace resources here as well. So we will send a copy of the slides out so you can click on these links and do a bit more reading on the topics which are right for you in your own time. But the first step in taking better care of yourself is to develop that self-awareness and realise when you're not coping as well as you could be. So if you are struggling or feeling that you're letting others down or finding it difficult, do take some time to look after yourself and to seek some help. So make use of the resources. Have a look at what you think your stress signature might be, and sort of have a look at something you can do to manage your stress and cope a bit better over the next week. So I hope you've found it useful this afternoon. We've got a couple of minutes before the session finishes, so I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining this afternoon. Do fill in the feedback form, and we hope to see you on another webinar very soon.